Good afternoon, good evening all, it's Bear here. And I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, aboxwithnolid. A channel I'm creating not just to bring the awareness around the lived reality and the complexities of living with complex trauma, but I also want to delve into and basically get out there into the world, everything I've learned in so many decades of being around this stuff that I believe is helpful not only in improving the quality of our lives, in understanding why things are the way they are, why we feel the way we do, and why things happen the way they do, but also in ways to bring the real world understanding of bridging between the complexities of how trauma is perceived in society and in the world, in the psych world, into the everyday. Now, this is the next video in the adoption series, and I want to carry forward with this identity of presence in another facet of this, which is one of the key aspects of the fog, is when we create or when we learn an identity of presence, it's not natural, it's not reflected in the biological makeup of those around us. It's developed with our attempt to be part of the family, the non-biological family that is raising us, or the non-biological people when you're looking at foster care, because you're moving from different house to different house. This whole identity of presence is developed for a different reason, as I spoke about in the last video. But I want to go into a little offshoot of this. Now, a part of our identity of presence is our goals. What it is we seek to change, what it is we seek to create, what it is we seek to pursue, what we seek to resolve or fix. And when you come from a trauma base as a child, those are pretty intensely powerful ideals. This determination of try to prevent something from happening, to try to change something in the world, is an adult's interpretation of the infant's of, I just want to stop what is happening to me from happening, this bad stuff. I want, what I'm seeking and what I want. That power is so strong within our identity of presence that what I see happen a lot is it manifests in we pursue the ideals and the ideologies of those who are raising us in an attempt to appease it. And a lot of people go, well, that's what you do. If you're being raised in, a household, they choose you. They're going to raise you in their way of doing things. But in understanding, there is a catch to that when you're looking at attachment from a survival base. When you're looking at it from the perspective of we've learned rather than created or grown our identity of presence, is we're seeking ideals that are not ours. And quite often they are the opposite of what our infant self is trying to resolve. And that is one of the largest conflicts, non-conscious conflicts, that I see play out so often in the world of adoption and the world of foster care. It's this torn nature that is repressed constantly within those of us that live with it. We're convincing ourselves that we are part of a family that's not biologically our own. We defend that we are part of this family when kids in primary school and preschool go, why don't you look like your mom and dad, and so forth and so forth. We create this survival structure. We create this process of defense, proving that we are part of this non-biological family that raises. And a component of that is we need to be seen publicly of pursuing their beliefs. Now, that's fine if the beliefs are similar. And that does happen. Blonde hair, blue-eyed people may adopt a blonde hair, blue-eyed kid. Therefore, the chances of certain aspects of their ideologies are similar. But what happens when, Anglo people adopt indigenous kids? You see it of children that are of a different race, of a different color, to those that are raising them. How does this affect this identity of presence? And this identity of presence as I said, it's everything that we are. And it creates a very difficult adult conflict that requires dismissing of so much of self if we want to have any hope of being part of the family that raises us. And quite often it creates such an obstacle that no matter how hard we try, we will never be seen as part of the family that's raising us, especially when you have such a stark contrast in physical appearance. The harm that does, that this society refuses to acknowledge, because when, Anglo people adopt indigenous kids, they're seen as saviors of these, poverty-stricken and, societally destructed, colonized nations of indigenous people, that their kids are taken, and society sees and justifies that this is a good thing. And that nullifies the entire experience that child, that person has, trying to make sense of all of this complexity. And we're expected to create a positive identity of self. Then you have the added layer of when you're adult, and if you go to seek to try to find and learn aspects of the indigenous culture, and this is even more prevalent for those that are mixed race. But I've seen it with full-blood, indigenous people when they go and seek their own culture, trying to find biological family and the culture that they are born from. The level of, putting it bluntly, bullshit that you have to go through. Outsiders are more welcome than you are. To try to even be part of, or even learn and be accepted, that it creates such an intense island of self belief system. And it hits so hard in what you actually are that it can destroy your identity of self, this identity of presence. You actually lose the ability to actually see yourself as a functional person or as even a human being. I've seen this play out, I'm from the Vietnam era, the Vietnam War. And that's a large part of how I came. My father was, fought in Vietnam. My mother was a nurse. But in Australia, they shipped thousands of babies out of Vietnam and out of the bases, the R&R bases around there, to other countries for adoption. And I've seen Asian adoptees virulently hate being Asian or hate Asians. It was so confronting in this one experience that's come to mind, that I remember in this one person that I tried so hard to help, create a way of communicating, because how destructive it was for her. And the way she was judged, and I've seen more than one example, but this is the one that's coming to mind. The way this was judged was she was ridiculed, and which further reinforced this. But all this was the screaming out of an infant in a box, wanting to be held and picked up by their biological parents and welcomed into their home and belonging, with all these components of physical connection. But because mixed race Vietnamese were hunted by the communist North and killed, that could never be. Going back to her community, that could never be, because she was a mixed race outside of that belief is still there. Because she was completely different to the race of the family that were raising her, reinforced that she wasn't part of, and it created this destructive nature that ultimately ended her far younger than it should have. And these are the memories, these are the experiences that I've had in so many places that I try to, that motivate me now to try to get this stuff out there. Because I'm sick and tired of societally diminishing and belittling what it is we're struggling with and trying to work out. And in all the community work and all these other things that I've done over many, many decades, how dismissive those that I'm trying to show these key points too, that if you don't get this, none of the stuff you do is going to matter. When you look at the identity of self, the identity of presence, of who we are, when you look at the reality that it's constructed, and when you look at that other layer of being completely physiologically different to those that are raising you, the complexities that that creates and the isolation that creates. Like for me, I've given up pursuing my indigenous ancestry, over in America and Canada, because I'm sick to death of having to prove. I don't claim any part of my indigenous ancestry on this channel, nor anywhere else. I'm just me, an entity, a person, because of it. But I will also still advocate, because another thing that's coming to mind is a mixed race Aboriginal friend of mine here in Australia, who is the kindest guy you'll ever meet, who's just been smashed down constantly because he was raised by white people. Yet, this is something that needs to be really understood, because cross-race adoption is so common. In the last 15 years, there's been a real trend for white people to adopt black babies, African kids, and so forth, Asian kids, people out of China. This is everywhere. This is not an isolated thing. A large component of the infants and babies and children that are adopted are a different race to the family that are raising them. And this needs to be understood at the complexity it creates, because children will always go, why don't you look like the person that raised you? Why do you have two moms? Why do you have two dads? Why are you different? And they will hound you because of that difference. And if you try to defend yourself because of that difference, you are punished for defending yourself. Therefore, you're taught to accept that abuse. And then that abuse escalates into bullying and the suicidality that is such a commonplace. In the world of adoption and foster care, is the highest demographics where suicide is such a strong component, as well as every other form of self-medication. We need to understand what creates it if we're going to address it, heal it, or fix it. And best case, prevent it from happening. We need to move past the ignoring of it. And we need to actually take those moments and think that an infant and a young child are trying to solve these problems in their developmental years. And we need that to cross into the understandings of society. Yes, I'm sorry this video is a little longer, but I need to get this understanding across, not only because it's personal for me, but it's because of people that I'm concerned about now, which has motivated me to do this video now. That is what's blocked them. That is what's isolated and separated them from everyone. And that is what they're judged for. I hope this makes sense. I hope this can bring a little understanding and kindness into the world around this particular area. I love you guys' comments and feedback. Please be mindful, please be safe, please be respectful, and I'll see you all next time.